What up, friends? My name is Stan from RandomTens, and Halloween has always been one of my favorite holidays. Now, I know lots of people love playing horror games around this time of the year, but to me there's nothing scarier than that one creepy or disturbing section of an otherwise cheerful adventure, and today on RandomTens I'll be counting down the top 6 creepiest Nintendo levels ever made. And just so you know, from here on out things are about to get a little spooky. You've been warned. Super Paper Mario is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated games of the past 10 years. The game's got sharp writing, pretty inventive gameplay, and loads of heart. Literally. So how could a game this colorful and this harmless make a list like this? Welcome to the Underwear. Silly title aside, this is a location for heroes who've experienced a game over along their journey. But what starts as a tongue-in-cheek reference to the underworld quickly deteriorates into an actual nightmare when you're forced to swim into the River Twig's bed. This liquid graveyard is creepy enough with its claustrophobic atmosphere and evil underhands itching to grab any lost soul, but what sets it apart from other games is the now iconic theme that only plays during this one 30-second portion of the entire game. The main reason this entry comes in at number 6 is because it's admittedly a very small fraction of the actual level. But I believe it's due to this eerie length that this area in particular has become so memorable for gamers all of these years later. Either way, if you haven't played Super Paper Mario yet, you should really give it a chance. Just be careful about those game overs. Most people play video games as a form of escapism. When you're stressed out or anxious about real-world problems, they can transport you to fantastical lands filled with magic and monsters that help players forget about the hardships of their day-to-day lives. But Earthbound is not one of these games. Yes, there are fantastical elements of course, but at its core, Shigesato Itoi's flagship series has a knack for taking society's worst fears and turning them into literal monsters or trials to overcome. And for many fans, there's nothing as unsettling as a trip to Moonside. Starting with a kidnapping, yes, really, Ness and Jeff find themselves in a creepy distortion of Fourside where yes means no and something just never feels right. In this level, everything you remembered about the town, including the music, has been left dark and hollow, and eventually once you manage to destroy the evil Mani Mani statue, it's revealed that the entire world of Moonside takes place in our protagonists' minds. Now, admittedly, the distorted town is more disturbing than actually scary, but the way it makes our heroes, and by proxy the player, feel like they're going insane is a testament to Itoi's understanding of the human mind, and how one of our greatest fears is losing control. Oh, and to make things just a little bit more unnerving, every item you acquire in Moonside stays with you, despite it supposedly only being an illusion. Yeah. One thing the Zelda series has always done better than its peers is create believable worlds out of basic concepts. An example of this is how the bottom of the well from Ocarina of Time could have simply been that game's throwaway spooky level, like a Boo House from Super Mario World. But by tying it into the bloodied history of Hyrule, as well as making its entry point a seemingly mundane object the players already encountered numerous times, the developers were able to create a world of unearthly horrors. And yet, for whatever reason, I always feel way more uneasy visiting the Forest Temple. Don't get me wrong, the bottom of the well gets very intense sometimes, but it's an expected level of horror. From the moment you set foot in Kakariko Village to find the Lens of Truth, you sort of know what you're getting yourself into. But the Forest Temple sort of builds on the post-apocalyptic nightmare you find yourself in as soon as you exit the Temple of Time as adult Link, and it never lets go. From the use of ghosts and monsters like the Wallmaster to the infamously repetitive music, the Forest Temple is very similar to Moonside in that it's all about separating what's real from what's not. But the second you find yourself lost in a world built to confuse, all of that goes out the window as panic seeps in. Also, it doesn't help that the N64 doesn't have the cleanest models, being the series' first foray into 3D and making everything look stained and unpolished in this haunted maze. Oh, and speaking of the N64, Donkey Kong 64 is a terrifying game to play if you're alone at night. I know that nowadays the only argument people have about this game is whether it's too tedious or not, but no, screw that. What people should actually be arguing over is if children should even be allowed to play it. The entire game has this somber, hopeless tone to it right from the start, and from gloomy boss battles like this, to voice lines like this, "Get out," you can probably figure out why this game gave me and my friends the heebie-jeebies as a kid. However, despite having a level literally called Creepy Castle, for me the darkest this game gets is Frantic Factory. This is the first world where you're in King K. Rool's fortress, and the entire time you can feel something almost ominous looming. Everything is rustic and mechanical, there's poor lighting everywhere, and if you're afraid of clowns, then I urge you to please pass the controller to a friend during this level's boss fight. Admittedly, this is my most biased entry on the entire list because it had such a dark effect on me as a kid, but I genuinely do feel like those who have played this one understand where I'm coming from, and those who haven't should seriously check it out, as the entire game has been a Halloween favorite of mine for the past few years now. When coming up with the initial idea of creepy levels, I knew immediately that something from the Metroid series had to be in this video. I mean, the franchise was inspired by one of the greatest horror films ever made, but the question was, which level should make the cut? Should it be the research lab from Metroid Prime? Or possibly something a little more eerie from the slower and more limited original? Well, after a little thinking, it finally dawned on me that Metroid Fusion might just be the most terrifying non-horror game I've ever played. I'm dead serious. This is a game where you feel like the last remaining victim of a deranged serial killer, and every time the ruthless SAX appears on screen, usually during a time where you least expect it, you will literally freeze up due to the tension. Now, technically, if I had to pick one singular creepy area, I would pick Sector 6, but the truth is, this entire game is basically one giant level, and you're playing the role of victim for almost the entire thing. So yes, I'm aware picking an entire game is a blatant cheat, but I promise you that if you've ever experienced Metroid Fusion for yourself, you'll know exactly why I couldn't leave it off of a list like this. As I alluded to at the beginning of this video, there's something about creepy and disturbing elements in otherwise bright and cheerful video games that really makes them stand out in a player's mind. And personally, I can't think of a single series other than Pokemon that's done this more frequently. From the old chateau in Diamond and Pearl to the ghost girl in Lumio City. If I had a nickel for every time the Pokemon franchise creeps into disturbing territory, I could buy a bicycle from Cerulean City. And although many of you are probably conjuring up ideas and imagery of Lavender Town right now, the truth is, there's something even more scary than people killing Pokemon. And that's what happens when Pokemon kill people. The strange house in Pokemon Black and White 2 is an odd building off the beaten path that's not necessary to complete the game's main narrative. However, due to the circumstances surrounding the decrepit home, it's no wonder why this particular side quest has become so ingrained in the series' darkest lore. In Black and White, there was a young girl calling out on Marvelous Bridge who disappears when approached, and in the sequel games, players finally receive some insight into what happened to this unfortunate soul. After completing the house's puzzle, it can be assumed that this small girl was a victim of a wrathful or confused Darkrai, and even after obtaining a lunar wing from the legendary Pokemon Cresselia, she eventually succumbed to Darkrai's eternal nightmare and died in the strange house. To this day, her spirit still haunts the boarded up home, and is attempting to give Cresselia its wing back now that she no longer has any use for it, which is extremely dark, especially for a Pokemon game. Now, of course, the circumstances surrounding her death are inferred from a few pieces of dialogue, so how she died is still technically unconfirmed. But the point is that a little girl did die here, and nothing you do can save her, which is a takeaway that stays with everyone who's ever entered this depressing building. So this Halloween, if you're in the mood for something disturbing with a little bit of heartbreak thrown in, look no further than the strange house in Black and White 2. Just be prepared to lose some sleep. Well, that's all the time we have for this special episode, but I hope you guys enjoyed this countdown of creepy Nintendo levels, and I hope at least one of your picks made the list. Make sure to check out our other countdown videos if you haven't done so already. You can follow us at RandomTens on Twitter for news and updates, and, as I always say, happy Halloween, baby rhinos. Peace.
Stan, what's the matter? I heard you screaming. I had another nightmare that I made a video that wasn't a top 10 countdown, but our name is RandomTens.
It's okay, little guy. The comments can't hurt you now that you're awake. Do you need a hot milk to calm your nerves?
Yes, please.